And the buyer's attorney said, hey, we got a problem. We did a survey, and the survey came back, and your building actually encroaches 3 feet into the neighbor's yard. Welcome to the Ryan Rice Show, where we talk about what we learned yesterday that we can apply today so that we can be better tomorrow. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. I want to tell a story about one of the more bizarre deals that I've ever done. And this deal involved drug dealers, squatter tenants, finding out after I bought the building that it was 3 feet into my neighbor's yard. What I did to work through this deal, still make a little under 50K. Hopefully you never come across a deal where you buy your building and then find out after the fact that it encroaches onto a neighbor's property. But I want to tell the story in the event that that does happen to you. You know what to do and you know how to get out of it. And I'll also talk through what I learned and how to make sure that you don't buy a building that goes 3 feet onto your neighbor's property. So I bought this duplex, and the whole closing process was in and of itself fun. It was a duplex, a downstairs and an upstairs unit. The downstairs unit was a more stable tenant, however, was not paying rent, but was more cooperative. And the upstairs unit was rented by a tenant who abandoned the property and then allegedly had sublet illegally these drug dealers that were running some sort of drug operation out of the top. So it was pretty fun. And I got a really good deal on this duplex because the owner was not in communication with his tenants, didn't know, and had zero desire to work through these tenants. And so I got it for a pretty big discount. And because of the discount that I got, I was willing to take on the risk. And I felt very comfortable with what my tenant and owner rights are. And so I knew exactly what to do, and we had a good plan. But anyhow, so I bought the property, closed on it. The day that we closed on it, we went out. We had been in communication with the downstairs tenant prior to close, but we came up with a plan for the downstairs tenant. And my real estate agent, by the way, is the one who kind of facilitated and actually executed all of this. But he spoke with a tenant. The tenant was actually friendly, found a good solution. He actually wanted to get out of that place because he didn't feel comfortable with what was going on upstairs and the living conditions of the place. I mean, this place, there was significant deferred maintenance from the owner. The owner just didn't really take care of the property much, and so the guy was living downstairs, but it wasn't a very good unit for him to live in. So he knew that he wanted to get out. He knew he needed to get out, and he was excited about the idea of getting out, and so we helped him do that. So my agent kind of talked to him, and everything was fine there, and that tenant actually gave us some good information about what needed to happen with the upstairs unit. And so what my agent actually ended up doing is he went to the upstairs unit. And I mean, this is kind of a scary situation for him, right? I think I was either on the phone while he was there, or I talked to him right after. But he knocked on the door. No one was there. The door was unlocked. He went inside, and I mean, it was bad. To paint a picture of the shape of this place, because he sent me videos and pictures. I mean, you walk in, there's stuff everywhere. There's furniture knocked over. There are needles. And when I say needles, I mean, there was at least like 5 or 6 needles. I mean, it was very clearly some sort of operation. Since we had information that the upstairs tenant was kind of abandoned and wasn't living there anymore, prior to closing, the owner was cool with us putting the proper notices. So legally, we did the right thing, right? We put the right notices on there, and then when the time allowed, we were able to then take the appropriate action. And so when the agent went upstairs and walked in and saw that the unit was kind of abandoned, he just boarded it up, and that ended up working. Nobody came back, and he secured the unit, and I think the upstairs tenants got wind that we were doing what we were doing with the property. We did post the notice. maybe they read it, whatever the case. He boarded the upstairs, and they actually never came back. And so the downstairs unit eventually vacated. I think we gave him some money so that he could get on his feet, and he was very grateful for that. We cleaned out the unit, and I already had a buyer lined up. So I actually attempted to wholesale this duplex before I closed on it. And because of the tenant situation, and there was so much uncertainty there, and because we felt comfortable that we knew what to do, I ended up just deciding that it would make more sense to close on it, take care of the tenants, let me clean it out, and then I'll get a buyer. So I was in communication with a few people that were interested in it. And this was actually the first property I ever tried to wholesale, and I ended up not wholesaling it. So I closed on it, and then the tenants left, and then I cleaned it out, and then I went back in communication with a buyer, found someone that was super interested. This actually happened to be a pretty prominent buyer in this area, and they were interested with making it the downstairs unit like an apartment type, or like a livable unit, or maybe an office, and then she wanted to make the upstairs unit a livable unit, and then I think the downstairs a commercial property, or like an office space. And so I found the perfect buyer for it, and we wrote up a contract and went into contract for sale. And I think at our sale price, I was going to make just short of $50K. And after we got in contract, I ended up actually flying out to Las Vegas for a real estate conference. So I was at Las Vegas, and I either got a text or a phone call from my attorney about this deal. And he was like, "Hey, we got a problem." I said, "Okay." And actually, I remember I was working out at a CrossFit gym when all of this went down. And so I'm in the middle of my workout, and we get a note from the buyer's attorney. So I was represented by an attorney, and the buyer was represented by an attorney. And the buyer's attorney said, "Hey, we got a problem. We did a survey, and the survey came back, and your building actually encroaches 3 feet into the neighbor's yard." And so I finished my workout or whatever, and I call my attorney, and I'm like, "What in the world? Like, I've never dealt with this before. How does this even happen?" And apparently this was something that in this part of town, this is in Richmond, Virginia, and in this part of town, it's not uncommon for there to be some boundary issues, and I didn't know this when I closed on it. But the whole reason that the buyer's attorney suggested to the buyer that she get a survey is because apparently they've had some issues with boundary lines in that part of the town. And anyhow, he saw enough evidence that he was like, "Hey, I think you should get a survey." So they got this survey, and the results came back that my building encroached 3 feet into the neighbor's yard. And I was not very happy. Like, my first thought was, I talked to my attorney, and I was like, "Hey, is there a reason you didn't suggest the survey?" And of course, he had some good reasons there, but needless to say, I'm in this position, and I got to figure out what the heck I'm going to do. And so I was talking with my attorney, and he's like, "All right, here's what you need to do. You need to figure out who owns the property next door. You need to get in touch with him, and he needs to sign an affidavit that is going to move the boundary line 3 feet, and so it's going to make his property line 3 feet smaller, so that you can just sell the property." And here I am in Vegas. I'm at a real estate conference. I find out that this deal that I was excited about making, 40 to 50K on, we were supposed to close within the next week, I think. And now I have to figure out who owns the property next door and somehow convince him or her that he should move his boundary line to make his property 3 feet smaller on that side so that I could sell my property. And so I just remember thinking, wow, well, this is not ideal at all. So I did my thing, and for those of you, if you ever want to find out who owns a property, the easiest way is just look on the county or the city auditor site. And for those of you that are in real estate, you probably know that. But I figured out the name of the person that owns the property. I think it was actually in an LLC, and so I had to go to the Virginia SEC website and look up who owned the LLC. And I figured out who it was, and my attorney actually helped, and he was like, "Hey, I Googled this guy, and he's actually a doctor in Richmond." And I was like, "Okay, well, that's a good sign." And so my attorney sent me the information. I looked the guy up. I found his doctor's office. Real quick, as you guys know, I just recently started this podcast. If you could give it a rating with a quick tap of the thumb, that would mean the world to me. And even more importantly, it could help spread the word to a broader audience, which in turn could help change a life. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna call and see what happens. So I call. Thank God someone picked up. It was a very nice clerical person. And so she picked up, and I remember saying to her, I don't even know how to articulate this. Well, first I was like, hey, is, Dr. So-and-so there? And of course they're going to screen, and she didn't just transfer me directly to him. And so I said, hey, I have the most bizarre scenario, and I don't really know how to explain it too much in detail but here's the reason why I need to talk to him. And is it possible for me to talk to him? And I told her that my building encroached onto his property, and I just needed to speak to him about what my options were because I'm trying to sell it. And so I get him on the phone. She had to okay, let me call you back. And she called me back, and we set up a time so that I could speak to this guy. So I feel like miracle number one is just that I found him. Miracle number two is that I actually found a way to talk to him. And this all happened in the same day. I got a hold of him relatively quickly. So I got him on the phone, and I said, Doctor, I'm so sorry to bother you with this, but I'm very, very grateful that you're taking the opportunity to actually speak with me. Thank you for making time for a complete stranger with a very bizarre scenario. But here's where I'm at. I bought this duplex. We did a survey, and we figured out that it encroaches 3 feet onto your property. And what was so funny, he was like, yeah, when this property next door, by the way, that was his property, it was just vacant land. It was probably, I don't know, maybe a half acre to a full acre of just open field. So obviously the first thing I did is ask him if he wanted to sell it, and he didn't at the time. But I said, hey, I bought this duplex, and it encroaches on your property. And he was like, yeah, what's funny about that is when I bought my land, I feel like I remember seeing something about that, but I just didn't really want to worry about it at the time. And so we didn't really do anything with it. And he was intrigued that I bought this property, because he knew a lot of the nefarious activity that was going on. And so I told him that I kind of bought it and I cleaned it up. And I think that established some goodwill, right? Because I think me doing what I did with my duplex made his land better or more desirable, because there's not this, duplex with a bunch of nefarious drug activities going on there. And so I said, look, here's what my attorney is suggesting. And I want your feedback. Tell me if you're okay with this. We just need an affidavit that's going to move our boundary line over 3 feet. And I can email you the affidavit. I'll send you a mobile notary. It has to be notarized because we need to get recorded with the city. And that's kind of my plan and what I'd like to do. What do you think? And very casually, he was just like, yeah, that's fine. I'll do it. And I remember this, oh my gosh. I was in my Airbnb when I talked to this guy. And I remember I was standing in the kitchen of the Airbnb. And when he told me that, when he said the words like, okay, yeah, that's fine, I'll do it, I had this overwhelming sense of relief, because I had all of the, negative possible scenarios running through my head about what could happen with this duplex. It's 3 feet into my neighbor's property. What if he says no? He might ask for some sort of compensation. He might not want to move the boundary line. Am I going to be stuck with his duplex? I mean, there was a ton of things, right? But he agreed to do it, and I had this overwhelming sense of relief, kind of rushed through, but I still need to execute on what the plan was. So I got a mobile notary out to his office. He ended up signing the document, and we got the boundary line affidavit recorded. We got it moved. We got the boundary line moved, and was able to go through with the sale and made a little under $50K. And it was a wild ride. And for those of you that are in real estate can certainly be a roller coaster. And this was certainly a deal that was a roller coaster of a deal. And so I wanted to share that story with you guys, because if you ever buy a building and it encroaches on the neighbor, then that's how I got through it. And I hope hearing that story is helpful in the event that you ever have that happen to you. I think most importantly, here's kind of what I learned about and what my takeaways were about how to make sure that doesn't happen again. First and foremost, I hate to say it, but that's the last deal that I closed with that attorney. And that attorney, I'm actually still friends with that attorney. I was over at his house a couple of weeks ago. He is a great individual. But there could have been some significant ramifications, and it kind of piqued my light bulb went off, right? Because the attorney that the buyer was using, the buyer was not going to get a survey. And that buyer was I was in her shoes just a couple months ago when I bought the property, and it was not suggested to me that I get a survey. And when I talked to him about that, he basically just said, when I talked to my attorney that I bought the property with about that, he basically just said, yeah, I didn't think about it. It didn't occur to me that I should have a survey. And when I dug in a little bit deeper and understood what led the other attorney to actually get a survey, that's when, I actually started using that attorney that the buyer used for all of my future transactions. And so I think how to make sure that it doesn't happen, it's really important to have the right people on your team, right? Whether that's the right settlement agent, which can be a closing attorney or a title company. That attorney that suggested the survey knew the local area very, very well, was so familiar with it that he knew that there were boundary line issues in this area because it was a really old part of the city. And then he saw enough evidence in the property that just said, hey, you should probably pay the several $100 for a survey. And just having someone on the team who knows the area, who can suggest those things to you is really, really important. And so making sure that you close with the right settlement agent, making sure that you close with the right attorney, I think is really important. And how do you make sure that you close with the right one? Well, if that person has done a lot of deals in this area, then that is probably a good indicator that at least the experience is going to bring you some value, because when things come up that are going to be specific to that area, this person is going to have experience. And I think the second thing that you can do to make sure that that doesn't happen, or something that I at least consider in all the deals that I buy going forward, is something as simple as getting a survey. Some of my private lenders actually prefer that I get a survey. Some hard money lenders actually require that I get a survey just for things like this. And so getting a survey where, and essentially if you're just getting started and not familiar with what a survey is, it is an individual who comes out and who does research on the property and pulls the legal description and essentially figures out exactly where the boundary lines are based on the legal description of that property. And so a survey can be really valuable. And And some things to look out for when you're doing a deal, right? If you're doing a deal and it kind of looks like, your property might mesh together with a neighbor, or there's like a fence that looks a little bit out of place, which in this case I had a chain link fence on my property, and the chain link fence and the building is what encroached, and I don't know that it looked weird. Like, it obviously didn't look weird enough for me to think about a survey when I bought it. But there can be some visual indicators where if you look at the property and something doesn't look right, or you're curious if this fence is part of the property and you talk to the neighbor and the neighbor's not sure, getting a survey is the way to make sure that you're very, very clear on where your property's boundary line is. And that can be especially helpful too if you want to, like, build a garage, or you want to add a fence to your yard. You want to make sure that you're not going to build any of those things into the neighbor's property, and then there's going to be like zoning setbacks, and you have to build a garage or a fence a certain amount of feet from the setback of the yard. And so just getting a survey in and of itself can be super, super valuable. And had I done it when I bought the property, at least, I may have had to deal with that when I went to purchase it, but at least it wouldn't have caused as much stress as it did when I was, halfway across the country at a real estate conference and had to deal with with all this over there. So hopefully that was helpful for you guys to hear about, and hopefully you guys got some value out of that. If anything, maybe some laughs and some entertainment. But I wanted to talk through that deal because it was pretty wild, and I'm glad that we got through it. And I definitely learned a couple things about it, and I picked up a new attorney relationship, and so I think that in and of itself was a win for me. So thank you guys for listening. I love you guys. Hopefully you guys got something out of that, and until the next one, I'll see you. Peace.